I actually want to begin, if you don't mind me saying, my mother is 70 years old, and she lives in Boston. And she recently read the Entertainment Weekly Summer Preview magazine.
Right.
And she calls me up and she says, there's only 2 movies this summer I'm interested in seeing, and they both open on the same day. Avengers and the Best Exotic Marigold Hotel.
The 2 superhero movies.
But I thought it was interesting because obviously they're opening on the same day, and obviously you would think it's different demographic, it's different audience. But then she made me think, well, maybe there is a crossover. Maybe there is a similar audience. What do you think about that?
I said that last night. We found that there is a crossover, strangely. I mean, I'm not suggesting that young males 20 to 27 are going to go belting in to see this movie, though women of that age, I think, might very well do. But what we found is somehow because the film is partly about old people thrown into a circumstance where they suddenly start behaving like young people because they throw away every assumption they've made about themselves, and there's no society around them that is saying you have to be this or that. Because of that, there's some. It seems to have a sort of reach back into a younger perspective. So young people look at it and go, "Oh, that's what old people are like," rather than, the kind of rather encrusted sort of attitudes that we've got into in the West. And the film is funny, I suppose, and that's a great leveler and a great disarmer, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I heard you mention that you had sort of been approached with the material and that the script wasn't quite right. You went off, you made The Debt, which is a wonderful film I enjoyed. And then you came back to the material to do this film. I was curious, what was it that wasn't quite right about the script the first time, and then the second time that you said, well, now I think I'm ready to do this?
I think, it's invidious to it's got nothing to do with sort of personalities or writers or anything. The first script I read was adapted by the author herself, and I think that it's a really good book, but the book has preoccupations that are appropriate to the novelistic form. It's concerned with the backstories of the characters and their families and the wider circumstances they come from, and the book deals with a lot of those things. I felt that if you were going to make this as a film, it needed to be insistently and intensely present tense, because there's just occasionally you have a film where the experiences of the characters within it can be reflected by the experiences of the people watching it. What I mean in particular in this case is that the characters fall under a kind of intoxication because they go to a place they're completely unfamiliar with. None of the rules apply. The place is sort of magical in some way, threatening in another way, very difficult and very hard to get your bearings on. And one of the pleasures of watching the film, I think, to people who don't know India, is to be thrust into that experience themselves. So a film is a kind of an intoxication, isn't it? You enter a world, and different rules apply, and if the film works and is strong, you come out of it transformed in some way. So I felt that the really important thing was to sort of cut these characters off from their moorings. They didn't know anything about each other. God knows the world they arrive in knows nothing about any of them. And I thought that was a pretty unusual thing, particularly with old people.
And we as an audience don't quite know what's going on.
We have no idea about any of them, and as it unfolds, we respond the way the other characters are responding because they don't know anything either. So it's quite unusual that in a film it just moves forward in its own space and its own time. And the first script that I read, I'd have started work on it if I hadn't had another film, but it just wasn't in that place.
Right.
And by the time I came back to engage with it again, after I'd finished this other film, strangely enough, that had sort of happened. A writer called Ol Parker had come onto the script, and it was on the way to that, and then once I came on board, Ol and I dismantled the script again completely and built it from the ground up, once we knew the actors who were going to be in it.
Well, I'm glad that you segued into that, because it's an amazing cast of just the best British actors, best actors in general working today. What struck me about the film watching it was they do so little with their faces, but they say so much. Well, could you talk a little bit about that and their expression?
Well, that's good acting, good film acting. I think, of course, these are actors with a colossal amount of experience. Both in the business generally, but also with one another, because most of them have worked with one another. And also the other thing that you simply have to say is that they are all astonishing talents on their own. So some actors have a very, very special quality, and I would say all of the actors in this group do. To the point where I've been in the business a long time, I stare at it and think, I don't know how they are doing that. In some cases it's just very simple, very naked. Judi Dench is playing a character very unlike the characters you usually see her playing. She's playing quite a quiet, self-effacing, modest, deeply modest person who opens during the course of the story. That's completely different from the way you would normally see her. Not a million miles away from who Judy is herself. Tom Wilkinson, who was in The Debt, as you know, the last film I made, playing a completely different kind of character, just has an extraordinary versatility. Bill Nye is another very well-known actor who is on very different turf here. He's playing a kind of very decent, very sort of ineffectual fellow who, with a wife who stopped laughing at his jokes 20 years ago. Maggie Smith, obviously is now very well known again from Downton Abbey, where she plays a dowager, and in this is playing somebody at the opposite end of the social spectrum. So they are, it's a masterclass watching them. But the great quality I think all of them has is relaxation. They're very, very, very relaxed about what they're doing because they have nothing to prove, because they're carrying this film jointly. They're not carrying it singly. And somehow, the atmosphere of the place that we were making the film in seeps into everything they're doing. There's not really much of a distinction sometimes between, what was happening to Judy before I said action and what happens when I do say action. They just were in that world, and they were surrounded by people who were trying to touch them and so on. That, I don't know, that puts you in a very different place, I think.
Well, let me just end by asking you this. There was a line towards the end of the film that Maggie's character says to Judy, where she says, and I'm paraphrasing, but we haven't spoken yet, have we?
Yeah.
And it dawned on me that they hadn't really had a scene yet in the film. Was that added there?
It dawned on us as well. I mean, it dawned on me a long time before. And I said to Ol, we can't have these two actors in this film and not acknowledge that with a scene. And I mean, the first draft they didn't meet at all. And actually, one of the one of the tasks in the film was to braid the characters together, because they're both reacting to India, but they're also reacting to one another. And it's true that they haven't really, because most of Judy's character's story is outside the hotel, and the Maggie Smith character is confined to the hotel. And I always felt that she functioned as a kind of alternative Queen Elizabeth, the way Queen Elizabeth functions in Shakespeare in Love, where she walks on stage at the end as she does at the end of every Shakespearean comedy, of course. The monarch figure comes in and sorts everybody out and assigns people to partners and so forth. And that was the model for the Maggie Smith character, because she's in that hotel, she knows everything that's going on. She suddenly is at the center, she's the spider at the center of the web, and she could see exactly what everybody's doing. So we moved towards that scene at the end, but that's a sort of, I don't know, in an ideal world we'll see that play itself out in some other form in the future, I expect.
Excellent.
Just loading a gun.
Yeah, excellent.